What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Man of Mischief episode 2. Welcome to Project Potter, guys. My name is Kyle, your host. This is episode 2 of the Loki review series. If you guys haven't seen the show before, this one in particular, we're reviewing the Loki Disney Plus series that's on there. I was really high on the pilot, so we'll see how I kind of react to episode 2. It's only 6 episodes, so we are officially a third of the way there. Thanks for checking out the channel, guys. As you already know, go like, comment, subscribe. Go check out the other content on the channel. Good stuff. But for this episode, guys, what we're doing a recap of the episode. We are doing a award for the best character, which I call the Born to Rule. A award, I guess, for the least favorite character, which is the Get Help award. And in the score out of 10. So spent a lot of time on the recap last time, guys. Honestly, this was very dialogue heavy for this episode, so I'm going to spend less time. I kind of breeze through it just because there's a lot of dialogue, and it's really the end of the episode that's more important than I think the meat of it. So that being said, guys, here we go with the recap. So we start off here. I think it's 1985. They go to like a Renaissance festival. I think it's in like Oklahoma or something. I don't know. I didn't write it down. Probably edited in the correct location. But yeah, we kick off, and I think it's 85, and the Time Variant Agency shows up, and some girl's like, "Hey, you're not dressed appropriately." And then there's a funny line where she's like, "Hey, some of us need this, you know." She's like, "This is all we got." Nerd alert, if you ask me, you know. But they show up there, and you know, it's like a King Richard's fair, like a LARPing festival. I don't know the exact terminology, but it's like an old school fair there. And they go into like a barn, and it turns out that the variant Loki that they're chasing ends up like mind controlling one of the time cops. We're just gonna say time cops, time variant agencies, or agents, I should say. And she ends up turning, like she gets the green eyes or whatever. And then she turns up like fighting the agents there, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "Having fun" or whatever. And they're playing I Need a Hero, and it's like, all right, just heard that song in the Guardians trailer, so the Guardians video game trailer, so I know that's not their fault, but just a little overused, I think. But she kind of has some basic action, and then eventually like she like loses control or whatever, or they like release control, and then the Loki variant goes over and takes the time cop hostage, and goes into the portal. And then we get the Loki opening. We cut back to Owen Wilson and Loki, of course, and the Time Variant Agency. It's the same set of characters, and they're talking about how, you know, one of our teams went in there, the variant took them, and they go to like investigate. So they jump into 1985. There's a really great scene before they go in there where they're like huddled around, and they said, "All right, we're looking out for a Loki. Just remember, they come in various shapes and sizes, and there's like a hologram, and it's like a biker Loki, and it's like a monster Loki, and Loki's like, oh, he's kind of like looking like, oh shit, like I'm not the only Loki, and it's getting real for him, obviously." And so Owen Wilson's like going over his powers when he's briefing the team, and Loki's like, actually, he's like, you know, there's disillusion, and then there's this or whatever. I didn't write it down, but he's like, actually, this is a pure illusion. This is like mischievous, whatever it is. I don't really know, but it's a funny bit with Tom Hiddleston, and they're like, remember, if you see Loki, like, kill it or whatever. And Loki's like, preferably the bad Loki. And they just kind of look at him. Funny little scene, I guess. But they jump into the fair, and then they go into like the barn or whatever where the hostage was taken. And they're like, oh, this Loki's taking hostages. That's new. And they're looking around, and they're like, you know, we don't see any evidence of anything here. And they're like, we have like 4 seconds or whatever, or 4, whatever they're measuring in, until red line, which I think is like they have to reset the timeline before red line, or it like messes up. I think it probably branches out. So they're sitting there, and they're like, all right, let's go, and like, let's reset it. And Loki's like, no, wait. He's like, what if the Loki variant wants you to do that? And they're like, they don't care about you, they care about me. So they're like, they're looking for me, and they're like, wow, this Loki really likes to waste time. He's like, we do, but he's like, the other one is also doing that, so they're playing right into their trap, and it's a whole thing. But they're like, forget this, and then they eventually like reset it. They're like right when they're redlining. But Owen Wilson started to trust this character, or Mobius has started to trust Loki, and he's kind of like sticking his back out for him. And so we get back there eventually. This episode focuses heavily on Loki and Mobius, as it kind of did in the pilot. So they're talking, they're having conversation there. There's a great bit about jet skis where Owen Wilson's talking about how cool jet skis are. He's never been on one. They almost dive into like a religious conversation where he's like, well, you know, how do you know that you're here or whatever? And Owen Wilson's like, it's stupid to think, like, if you think, like, he asked Loki, he's like, what about you? He's like, well, I was born Frostchild on Jotunheim or whatever. And he's like, right. And he's like, and you were raised by? And he's like, well, Odin of Asgard. And he's like, Odin of Asgard. He's like, God of the heavens. And he's like, see, it's kind of ridiculous when you think about it. And it's funny because they kind of touch on, like, the aspect of religion or where we come from or where we are or what's our purpose. So it's a little like Marvel dipping their toes into that reality a little bit again. Similar to how they had like the Black Lives Matter thing for Falcon Winter Soldier, and this is just kind of another like, hey, this is a fantasy world, but also we're going to touch on real subjects too. So that was an interesting bit there. There's a whole great sequence where they talk, and Loki, you know, basically tells him like, okay, so what happens at the end? He's like, well, the timekeepers, like, you know, we all meet at the end and there's peace or whatever. And Loki's like, that sounds a little ridiculous. But they're like looking for clues and they're trying to find out what's happening. So eventually, Owen Wilson puts him on like desk duty, basically, where he goes over to like a library and points at the desk, and Loki says, okay, I need he tries like hitting on the librarian, which is funny, and he's like, okay, I need access to, you know, beginning of the world files or whatever, and she's like, those are classified. And he's like, how about end of the world files? She's like, those are classified. He's like, how about like apocalyptic dates? And he's like, she's like, those are classified. And he's like, what can I have access to? And she hands him like the smallest file. And what he has access to is the destruction of Asgard, which is really cool. It's Ragnarok, and he reads it, and it's really, really a cool moment because he reads it and it's like casualties. It says like 9,700 casualties or whatever, and it says like no variants detected. So it's like it wasn't another Loki that did that. It's like, no, the sacred timeline is like destruction of Asgard. And obviously we know this is Ragnarok, and they kept mentioning Ragnarok, dude, and I was like, please go to Ragnarok or go in there, and I hope that they do for a future episode. I hope they jump in. Based on what happened at the end of this episode, I'm not going to spoil just yet. I really hope that they find a way back into that world. They were teasing it, and I was like, dude, go into Ragnarok. Just go back there. Like, imagine if you see Loki, and then you see our Loki. He makes a joke about, like, oh, what if I go in there? There's a great scene, probably my favorite scene of the episode, where Owen Wilson, he sits down after he's reading the file, and he goes over, and he's like, don't bother me until you've read all the files. And he's like, I did read all the files. He goes in there, and he's like, let me see your salad. He's like, no. He's like, this right here is Asgard. He's like, that's not Asgard, that's my lunch. And he's like, don't do it. And he's like, and this is me, and this is Hulk or whatever. And he's like pouring the salt, and Owen Wilson's like, don't. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, that's my lunch, and I'm hungry. And then he goes over to talk to the guy that he threatened with a fish last time. So what's a fish? Really funny guy. And he's like, you again? And he's like, give me this. And he takes like a milk carton or whatever, and he like pours it out. And he's like, basically Loki explains in this series, or this scene I should say, he says, guess what? He's like, you know where the variant would be hiding? He's like, anything that happens before like a world-ending apocalyptic event, he's like, there's no variance activity, because no matter what happens, he's like, and that's why his demonstration is like, he's like pouring the milk and stuff into the salad, and he's like, this is Ragnarok. He's like, Ragnarok is happening no matter what. He's like, everything is getting wiped out. So he's like, the variant would hide there because nothing's going to change. No matter what happens, that's going to get wiped out. And I was like, it's a great point. And so Owen Wilson's like, but that's not true. He's like, no, seriously. He's like, the variant would never be noticed because it's going to get wiped out anyway. And he's like, he can just move from apocalyptic point to apocalyptic point. And so he's like, look, he's like, let me test it out. And they go to Pompeii, Italy. I think it's 79 AD. And there's supposed to be like a big volcano that erupts there, and it's funny because they're standing there, and he's like, just so you know, he's like, we're not supposed to be here. So he's like, we can't do anything. He's like, if this doesn't work, like, it's gonna branch off and cause all these issues. And Loki's like, don't worry, it's gonna work. And so he's like, all right, well, how about we try like small variants? He's like, make bird noises. And he's like, bird noises? And he just gets up, and Loki goes, people. He like starts speaking in Italian or whatever, and he lets out all of the animals in the cart. And he goes, that volcano right there, he's like, I am from the future. He's like, that is about to erupt and you are all going to die. And then people are looking at him like, what? And he's like, yep, I know this because I'm from the future. And then we look over, and then the volcano explodes, and these people start running, and he's like, he's like, yep, you can do this. And he starts throwing stuff around. He's like, none of this matters because we're all going to die. He's like, none of it matters. It's really funny. And then like, Owen Wilson's looking on his like scanner, and it says like no variant activity detected. So he's like, oh my god, I can't believe it. He's like, you're right. If there's a world-ending like apocalyptic event, whatever you do before then is not going to affect it because it's going to be wiped out anyway. So really, really cool stuff, and I'm sure it's going to be a huge factor going forward. So they go back to the TVA, and they're looking through, and they're like, okay, we got to find the apocalypse event, and like that's where Loki is going to be. And they're like, okay, which one? Owen Wilson's like, there's so many. He's like 2049, 2050. He's like, man, it's just time after time. And I don't know how they settle on it, but Loki says like 2050 Alabama. And so he's like, that's the one. And so Owen Wilson gets permission from his boss, which is the judge, where she says like, you know, like Owen Wilson's starting to question after their conversation, like, what are the timekeepers up to anyway? He's like, what are they doing? And she's like, you know, I don't have to talk about this or whatever, the judge. And seems like she's kind of hiding something there, but we kind of get back to that later. But they eventually like approve a task force team, and they're like, all right, we're going to 2050 Alabama. They go to like looks like a futuristic Walmart, and I was like, kind of a weird like choice to go there. So they go there and they show up. These people are all scared, and there's like a bad storm, there's like a hurricane or whatever, and it like takes out the sign, and it's cool visually. And they show up soaking wet, and they go in there. There's a great part where Loki uses his magic, and she goes, what the hell is that? And he's like, what? He's like, that was just magic to clear my suit so I'm not soaking wet like you guys. And I'm like, oh, it's nice. We forgot that Loki can use his magic outside of the TVA, so it's good for him to kind of see that. But they keep saying like, don't turn your back on us. And he's like, I won't. He's like, don't worry. Obviously, we know Loki's up to something. And so they go through, like I said, it's like a Walmart. These people are freaking out. They're like, please, we need like a copter or something. He's like, we have women and children here, and we need to get out of here. And Owen Wilson's like, I'm sorry, we don't have any of that. And he's like, how did you get here then? And they're like, sir, don't ask questions. So they walk away, and then there's like this scene basically the rest of the way where they're looking for the Loki variant. The lights are kind of flickering, but it looked kind of low budget, to be honest. But we find out that, as we found at the beginning of the episode, really, that this Loki variant can control people. So similar to Loki in Avengers when he had the Mind Stone, the Scepter. And so there's like normal people that are coming after Loki, and they split up. So it's Owen Wilson and Loki, who he's like, he's trying to go with Loki, and he's like, let me go with him. And then the hunter, I think it's HB15 or something, the hunter or whatever from the first one, the Got My Get Help award the first time. She's still in it. She's still really boring, but she's like, hey, come with me, Loki. Like, if you don't, like, we gotta trust him or whatever. So they go off, they split up into groups, and of course, as soon as Owen Wilson and Loki split up, you're like, dude, something's gonna happen. This girl has no control over Loki. So eventually the security guard gets like taken over or gets knocked out by the variant Loki, and then regular Loki starts like confronting or like fighting these just normal people that are being controlled by Loki. So there's like one guy, Randy, and he's like, you can call me Randy. And I'm like, I get it, but I just didn't care about this part really. But Loki's like, face me, you coward. And eventually they're like still hooking up like all these different, we see all these reset bombs in there, and we're like, okay, something's up, dude. And variant Loki in the control center says a timer for like 20 minutes that we see, and so we're like, something's gonna go down. And so eventually like Loki reveals himself as a variant and takes off the hood, and it's Lady Loki. And again, just kind of seems like a different character. I was like, should I know who that is? But I think it's just a variant Loki. So we get Lady Loki, which is cool. And they have a conversation where like Loki thought he was a superior Loki because he's like, I'm 10 steps ahead of you. And she's like, nah, dude. She's like, don't you know this isn't about you? And there's a scene where she kind of sets off. I don't even know why she needed Loki in there, but basically they split up the TVA or whatever, and the time goes off or whatever. And at the very end, in all these time portals, the time doors that the TVA goes through, they open up, and then like all of these different canisters, the reset canisters, there's like 8 of them or something, they all go through to different times, and we get such a great scene where she escapes through the portal, and Loki's kind of looking, and he's wondering what's going on, but we cut back to the TVA, dude. We see the sacred timeline, and oh my god, it's so cool because the lights start going off, everyone's like monitoring it, and all of a sudden, all these branches start going out, like 8 or 10 different branches, and the people are like freaking out. It reminded me a lot of Chernobyl, to be honest with you, great series. And so the guy picks up the phone and he's like, oh yeah, there's and then like they're typing super fast and the guy next to him goes, somebody bombed the timeline. And I was like, oh shit. Like he says like somebody just bombed the timeline, and like gave me chills, dude. It's so good. And that's when you know like, wow, something just happened. You see all these things branching off. And so what it exactly means, I'm not sure. The episode does end where Owen Wilson's running after Loki, and he's like, Loki, because the portal is still open, and obviously Lady Loki is luring Loki into there. And Loki looks at it, and he knows that this is like his only chance to kind of escape the TVA, because he's just stuck with them, and he knows that once he catches the variant Loki, like he's just gonna go back to his timeline, and he's already seen how he dies from Thanos and all that stuff. So he takes his opportunity, and we knew he's gonna go through the door. And Owen Wilson's like, "Don't do it, Loki!" And he runs through the door, and that's how the episode ends. Okay, guys, the Born to Rule award here, which is the best character, it's gonna go to Owen Wilson. I mean, his interactions with Loki were so good in the first episode. He was so strong, where he's playing that like comedic relief, but he's got that kind of underdog mentality and that like you're rooting for him, but you can tell like no one's really taking him seriously. But he's like, oh, just, you know, they keep telling him like, don't trust Loki, and he's like, look, I got a good feeling. He's like, just give me time, we'll figure it out. Owen Wilson is really good in this one. Tom Hiddleston was too, but I think Owen Wilson was above him in this one. And just like him just getting to know Loki more and being like, hey, I'm gonna put you on paperwork, kind of being in charge, but also being like, hey, jet skis are cool. He's having like that buddy cop, that bro moment with Loki. I just thought he was excellent in this episode, and I really like his character. And then I'm interested to see how his failure of like, they trusted Loki, and he's like, no, let me trust this Loki variant, like it's all good. And that doesn't mean that Loki can't get the variant Loki, but obviously TVA is going to question Owen Wilson now, and he's probably going to get demotion or something. So to see just him like kind of continue to be like believing in Loki and knowing like, trust me, and this is all going to work out, and he like begs the judge to send a squad, and she's like, I don't know, and you know, it's just that charming Owen Wilson, and he's just, I don't know, I really like him in this role. It's really like a different role than he usually plays, and I just thought he was excellent in this show, and I can't wait to see kind of what happens next. Okay guys, the Get Help Award, please get some help for the TVA squad, dude, just as in general. Like the TVA, all the side characters, I don't care about any of them. That includes the security guard from last week. But they're just like, they're supposed to be this like, you know, controlling all time, and they didn't see this coming. They didn't see the Loki variant doing this. I know that the Loki variant went through and was collecting the reset bombs and all that stuff, but like they're just so behind. They send a whole squad in there, and then like they just can't do anything, and Loki ends up being the one that like falls into the trap of Lady Loki. And I don't know why Lady Loki needs Loki in here, but she does say it's bigger than you, so that's really cool. I don't know, the TVA as a whole, like, awesome idea. The TVA sides characters, or the squads, including the main character, which is like the hunter, don't care about any of them. So they for sure get my Get Help Award, because I just couldn't care less. Okay guys, first score for this one, I was very high on the pilot. I love the ending of this episode, but I'm much lower on this one. This is an 8.2 for me. I thought a lot of the episode, although it was still a decent hour of TV, and I'm so into the Marvel Universe, as you can see here, that like, no matter what they put out, it's going to be high quality and entertaining. I'm going to watch it. But I thought compared to the pilot, I was so ready. This one I felt like I was like a lot of things didn't really mesh with me here. So like, I don't know, the end location of them going to like basically a Walmart, I'm like, this feels very low budget. Like they're having like a fight in the aisle, and I'm like, you could have gone to like a vast mountain or something, or like a desert, or just like something more aesthetically pleasing than like inside of a convenience store. Not a convenience store, but like a inside of a Walmart, dude. Basically like a future Walmart where like it was 2050, and the only difference was that like they had a hologram outside. And I was like, okay, it would have been cool if you had better stuff in there. The dialogue was really good, I think, but it was just a little too much of it. Like Loki kind of, there's a great scene I didn't talk about though, where he gets shushed, and or he's like, oh, another variant kills another people or whatever, and then the lady behind him like shushes him, and then he's like offended, and he turns around and then he shushes, because nothing is worse than when someone shushes you. It's like, what is that? And then you shush them back. So that was funny. But the Owen Wilson stuff in Loki was good. They talk about like, why are we here, and this is real. There's a line where he says like, it's real because I believe it to be real. It's really, really cool. But Loki's like pushing Owen Wilson's character to see like, well, why do you do this, and why do you believe this? And he's like, this is all I've ever known, and we trust the timekeepers, and it's all really cool. But it's like questioning why we're here and what we're doing. So that was cool. But I just thought a lot of the episode was like, I don't want to say a drag, but I was like, all right. The ending really saved it for me. I cannot wait to see when those branches going off, dude, and the people freaking out, being like someone bombed the timeline. It opens them up to so many possibilities where I'm like, dude, they can go in there now and do, obviously this is intended to like mess up a whole bunch of stuff and create probably the multiverse of madness. And so it's like the back of your head, you're thinking, how does this tie into Doctor Strange's movie that's coming out? I'm sure it does. But like they can now that the multiverse is like real, and now that like the sacred timeline is messed up, they can do so many things, dude. They can like go back to Sokovia and like, you know, put Black Panther in there or something, or like they can just do all these different things. They can go to like Cap, like one of Cap's scenes, and like throw Iron Man in there because like maybe the timeline bombs like reset everything so that like everything's mixed now, or we're gonna see alternate versions of our heroes. And it's like there's so many things that they can do where now they can basically write the most fun things that they can do. They can just write these in and be like, well, this is possible because the timelines are messed up. The sacred timeline was bombed, so Lady Loki messed all these up, so now we can just have all these different characters that were never even the same universe. Now we have them together. It's like it's so cool. I really hope they go back to like iconic moments, like when Loki was talking about the bridge scene in Ragnarok, dude. I was like, imagine if instead of Thor coming down, they have him coming down or something, and then like another character tackles them, or like just instead of Thor coming down, it's like just like a character you wouldn't expect to see. And it's just like they can do so many things. So for that reason, I'm really excited, and that really saved the episode. But I thought a lot of the episode, I was like, it was a big drop down for me from the pilot. With that being said, though, I'm still super excited to see what comes next. Okay, guys, that's it. That's another episode of Man of Mischief. Like I just said in the score, I wasn't as high on this one, but love Tom Hiddleston as Loki, love Owen Wilson. Those two really are the big pieces. And now I'm so excited for the ramifications of what Lady Loki just did, and what does that mean? Because these are resetting the timeline. But did she alter those at all? Like, is something happening? Are we going to go back to like scenes from Infinity War or Endgame? I'm sure Marvel's going to give us at least one incredible cameo where it's like a fan favorite scene is going to be so different now, because they're going to go, and I can't wait. But I was a little more down on this episode, but again, the show, we have 4 episodes left to go, so I love that they're doing this now, and then we have 4 episodes to be like, things could get crazy and then they can still get fixed, or maybe they're not going to get fixed, or I'm sure there's going to be some sort of ramification. It's going to be super cool, and I like that the Lady Loki variant doesn't seem like the big bad to me. It's kind of like Agatha being revealed in WandaVision, spoilers, and then like the big, well, I don't know, I guess Agatha ended up being like the big baddie, but I just think there's like a setup for something bigger. So we'll see what that's kind of setting up there. The timekeepers seem kind of sketchy, so we're not really sure about that. Something about the TVA definitely is going to be off. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like some crazy stuff happening at the end, but I'm really excited for what's to come. Thanks for checking out the show, guys. Thanks for checking out Project Potter. Like I said before, like, comment, subscribe, go ring that bell notification, and until next week, guys, peace.